The moment I realized my baby wasn't just in the next room, but was actively being carried out of my house by my mother-in-law, my world shattered. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a grandma being too helpful. This was an attempted kidnapping orchestrated by a woman obsessed with inheritance and controlling the family line. My in-laws, Carol and Richard, had always been overbearing. But after the birth of our son, Leo, the control escalated into a terrifying obsession. The main issue was money. My husband Mark's family is incredibly wealthy, but his father's trust stipulated that a massive portion of the estate would be reserved for the first legitimate grandson who would carry on the family name. Carol didn't see Leo as a baby. She saw him as a financial asset. From the day we brought him home, Carol was suffocating. She demanded we rename him. She tried to select his doctor, and she even tried to fire our nanny because she didn't look the part for their family image. When we firmly told her to back off, she shifted tactics. She started showing up unannounced at 3 a.m., criticizing my breastfeeding, and loudly informing anyone who would listen that I was an unfit mother who was destroying the family legacy. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly checking the locks and looking over my shoulder every time I walked from the nursery to the kitchen. The pressure reached a breaking point when Carol presented us with a contract of care. It was a 20-page legal document that would have given her shared legal custody and the right to decide Leo's education and residence in exchange for securing his future with a massive trust fund. Mark and I laughed in her face and tore the papers up, but Carol didn't scream. She just got very quiet, her eyes turning into cold, hard slits. That night, for the first time, I felt a deep, instinctual fear for my son's safety. I started noticing small things: a gate left unlatched, the smell of her perfume in the hallway when she wasn't supposed to be there, and finally, the discovery that the locks on Leo's nursery window had been tampered with from the outside. Mark installed a commercial-grade security system the next day, but we never dreamed we'd actually have to use it against his own mother. The true horror began last Tuesday. Mark was at work, and I was in a deep sleep after an exhausting night of feeding. Suddenly, the security alert on my phone gave a quiet, sharp chime. When I checked the live feed, the blood ran cold in my veins. The back door, which I knew I had double-locked, was standing wide open. I saw a dark silhouette moving rapidly down the stairs toward the driveway. It was Carol, draped in a heavy black coat, clutching a bundle that was unmistakably my newborn son. My first coherent thought was a primal surge of adrenaline that felt like a lightning strike to my heart. I didn't even grab my shoes or a coat. I just sprinted out the door into the freezing night. My bare feet hit the gravel driveway, but I didn't feel the pain, only the desperate need to reach that SUV. I was screaming Carol's name with a voice I didn't recognize, a raw, guttural sound of a mother whose child was being stolen. Carol was surprisingly fast, driven by a desperate, greedy energy that seemed to make her move with a strength she shouldn't have had. She had already reached her SUV, which she had parked 3 houses down under a dead street lamp, specifically choosing a spot where our porch cameras couldn't catch her license plate. I saw her fumbling with the rear door, her hands shaking as she tried to shove the heavy infant carrier into the back seat. As she turned and saw me barreling toward her, her face didn't show guilt or shame. It was a mask of pure, maniacal fury. I launched myself at her with everything I had, tackling her onto the damp grass of the neighbor's lawn just as she tried to pull the heavy door shut. The impact was heavy, and I heard the air leave her lungs in a sharp grunt as we hit the ground together. I didn't give her a second to recover. I scrambled up, ignoring the mud staining my clothes, and snatched the carrier from the seat. I held Leo against my chest like a shield, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought my chest might actually crack open. Carol stayed on the ground for a second, gasping for breath, then hissed at me. She called me a selfish, unstable girl who was sabotaging the family's future. She stood up, brushing the grass from her expensive coat, and actually screamed, "He is the legacy! He is mine!" At the top of her lungs, her voice echoing through the quiet suburban street. It was the most chilling thing I've ever heard. She truly believed she had a right to my son. By now, the commotion was impossible to ignore. Neighbors started flicking on their porch lights, peering through their curtains, and stepping out onto their lawns to see what the screaming was about. I pulled out my phone with hands so shaky I almost dropped it into the wet grass. and I dialed 911. I told the operator exactly what happened while Carol watched me with eyes that looked completely disconnected from reality. She realized the situation was turning against her as more witnesses appeared, and she made one final desperate lunge for the baby's handle. I shoved her back with every ounce of protective rage I possessed, and she landed hard against the concrete curb. When the police sirens finally began to wail in the distance, Carol didn't try to run. She just sat there on the cold concrete, adjusting her hair and coat, rambling to the air about bloodlines and trust funds, as if she hadn't just committed a life-altering felony. When the officers arrived, they found me standing there, shivering and crying, clutching my son's carrier so tight my knuckles were white. Mark was only minutes behind the police, having seen the security alert on his own phone at the office and driving like a madman to get home. He was pale, his face a mask of cold rage and disbelief as he watched the officers place his own mother in handcuffs. As they took Carol into custody, a second officer began searching her SUV. What they found inside made my stomach drop into my shoes. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision made in a fit of grandma craziness. Carol's SUV was fully stocked for a long-distance cross-country trip. They found a suitcase packed with newborn clothes, several $1,000s in cash in a hidden envelope, and a set of fake IDs for herself and the baby under entirely different names. They even found a printed map with a route highlighted toward a remote property in a different state. But the most damning piece of evidence was found in her glove box. A set of forged emergency custody papers she had clearly mocked up herself, designed to look official enough to fool any police officer who might have pulled her over during her escape. The following months were a blur of legal meetings, police interviews, and a deep, pervasive sense of violation that poisoned every room of our house. We went to the station to give our full, formal statements that night, and even then, the entitlement of that family didn't stop. Carol's husband, my father-in-law, Richard, showed up at the precinct at 4 a.m. He didn't come to apologize or ask if Leo was okay. He came to demand that we keep this in the family and drop the charges. He told Mark, right there in the lobby of the police station, that if we proceeded with the kidnapping case, he would officially write Mark out of the will and ensure he never saw a penny of the family estate. He actually had the audacity to call the kidnapping attempt a grandmother's over-enthusiastic display of affection. Mark looked his father in the eye with a level of clarity I had never seen before and told him to leave before he added witness intimidation to the charges. The trial itself was a grueling, emotional marathon that felt like it would never end. Seeing Carol in that courtroom, sitting behind a mahogany desk and still looking at me with that same entitled, superior glare, made my skin crawl every single day. Her defense team was expensive and ruthless. They tried to use the diminished capacity defense, claiming she was suffering from temporary insanity brought on by the stress of wanting to protect the family legacy. They even tried to paint me as an unstable mother with postpartum issues who had imagined the struggle on the lawn. But the evidence was simply too much for them to overcome. The security footage of her entering the house with a stolen key, the packed car, the fake IDs, and the forged custody documents were a mountain of proof that this was a cold, calculated crime. Carol was eventually convicted of attempted kidnapping and identity fraud, receiving a substantial sentence in a state facility. The judge was visibly disgusted by her lack of remorse, and he issued a permanent lifetime restraining order that barred her or anyone acting on her behalf from ever coming near us or our son again. Richard followed through on his threat, of course. He officially disinherited Mark, cutting him off from the multi-million-dollar estate that Carol had been so obsessed with. But by that point, the money felt like it was covered in lead. We realized that no amount of inheritance was worth the safety and sanity of our child. However, the victory felt hollow for a long time. The days following the trial were a nightmare of paranoia. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards or shadow on the wall made me lunge for the baby monitor. We ended up having to hire private security to sit outside our house 24/7 just so I could close my eyes for an hour at a time. The emotional toll on Mark was devastating. He was grieving the mother he thought he had, while trying to process the fact that she was a predator who valued a legacy more than his son's life. We eventually made the only choice we could. We sold our house, moved 3 states away to a city where no one knew our names, and changed our phone numbers and even our social media identities. We are now building a life away from the legacy Carol tried to steal, but the scars are permanent. Every time I see a dark SUV parked on our street or hear a floorboard creak in the middle of the night, I'm transported back to that damp lawn, fighting for my son's life. I look at Leo now, growing into a happy, healthy toddler who doesn't know the dark history of his own family, and I know that choosing his safety over that money was the only real choice a parent could ever make. We are free of them now, but we are always watching, knowing that greed like theirs never truly sleeps. So what do you think? Did Mark do the right thing by putting his own mother in prison and giving up a multi-million-dollar inheritance? Or should he have kept it in the family to secure his son's financial future? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me, hit that like button, subscribe for more daily drama, and I'll see you in the next one.